Hey, church. I hope you were at worship this last Sunday because it was a very special Sunday for me and for some of my students. It was Confirmation Sunday, which I had never experienced before. I did not grow up in the United Methodist Church, so this was all very new to me. So I had kind of this brand new experience of confirmation along with a lot of my students who were going through it for the first time, or for their only time, I hope. And something that struck me in particular about confirmation is that I was consistently impressed with how deeply and seriously these students thought about these theological concepts that we were presenting to them in class on a consistent basis. And I found myself not only learning the content that they were learning alongside them, but I also found myself learning a lot from them. And it was this beautifully humbling experience to kind of come to that realization that I do just as much learning from my students as they do from me. And that kind of put my role here at the church in perspective a little bit. And then I was thinking about what I was going to talk about today, and I remembered, I don't know if you've ever heard of these chicken soup books. They were popular in the 90s and in the early 2000s, and I used to read them all the time when I was a kid. This is Chicken Soup for the Teenage Soul, which feels appropriate for my role here, but I was browsing through this, and I came across a story that struck me in a particular way because it reminded me of how I've been feeling lately about my students and about these confirmands and this beautiful new journey that they are embarking in their faith starting on Sunday. So I want to read this to you. This story is called "The Most Mature Thing I Have Ever Seen." And it goes like this. Lunchtime at Monroe High School was consistent. As soon as the bell that ended the last morning class started ringing, the students swarmed towards their lockers. Then those who didn't eat in the cafeteria headed with their sack lunches toward the quad. The quad was a large, treeless square of concrete in the center of campus. It was the meeting and eating place. Around the quad were various school cliques assembled. The druggies lined up on the south side, the punkers were next to them. On the east side were the brothers. Next to them were the nerds and brains. The jocks stood on the north side next to the surfers. The rednecks were on the west side. The socialites were in the cafeteria. Everyone knew their place. This arrangement did create some tension, but for all the tension generated on the perimeter of the quad at lunchtime, it was nothing compared with the inside of the quad. The inside was no man's land. Nobody at Monroe walked across the middle of the quad. To get from one side to another, students walked around the quad, around the people, around the stairs, around the quad. Everybody knew about it, so nobody did it. Then one day at the beginning of spring, a new student arrived at Monroe. Her name was Lisa. She was unfamiliar to the area. In fact, she was new to the state. She had enrolled at Monroe that morning. All morning she had struggled to find her classes, sometimes arriving late, which was especially embarrassing. The teachers had generally been tolerant, if not cordial. Some were irritated. Their classes were already too large, and now this added paperwork before class. Before she made it through the morning to the lunch bell. Hearing the bell, she sighed and entered the crush of students in the hall. She weaved her way to her locker and tried her combination 3, 4, 5 times before it banged open. Standing in front of her locker, she decided to carry along with her lunch all of her books for afternoon classes. She thought she could save herself another trip to her locker by eating lunch on the steps in front of her next class. So Lisa began the longest walk of her life, the walk across campus towards her next class. Through the hall, down the steps, across the lawn, across the sidewalk, across the quad. As Lisa walked, she shifted the heavy books, alternately resting her arm that held her light lunch. She had grabbed too many books. The top book kept slipping off, and she was forced to keep her eye on it, balancing as she moved past the people, shifting books from arm to arm, focusing on the balanced book, shuffling forward, oblivious of her surroundings. All at once, she sensed something. The air was eerily quiet. A nameless dread clutched her. She stopped. She lifted her head. Hundreds of eyes were staring. Cruel, hateful stares, pitiless stares, angry stares, unfeeling, cold stares. They bore into her. She froze, dazed, pinned down. Her mind screamed, "No, this can't be happening!" What happened next, people couldn't say for sure. Some later said that she dropped her book, reached down to pick it up, and lost her balance. Some claimed she tripped. It didn't matter how it happened. She slipped to the pavement and lay there, legs splayed in the center of the quad. Then the laughter started, like an electric current jolting the perimeter, charged with nightmarish quality, wrapping itself around and around its victim. And she lay there. From every side, fingers pointed, and then the taunt began, building in ruckus merriment, building in heartless insanity. You, 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 you. And she lay there. From the edge of the perimeter, a figure emerged slowly. He was a tall boy, and he walked rigidly, as though he were measuring each step. He headed straight toward the place where the fingers pointed. As more and more students noticed someone else in the middle, the calls softened, and then they ceased. A hush flickered over the crowd. The boy walked into the silence. He walked steadily, his eyes fixed on the form lying there on the concrete. A hush flickered over the crowd. By the time he reached the girl, the silence was deafening. The boy simply knelt and picked up the lunch sack and the scattered books, and then he placed his hand under the girl's arm, and she got up. The boy steadied her once, and they walked across the quad and through the quiet perimeter that parted before them. The next day at Monroe High School, at lunchtime, a curious thing happened. As soon as the bell that ended the last morning class started ringing, the students swarmed towards their lockers. Then those who didn't eat in the cafeteria headed with their sack lunches across the quad. From all parts of the campus, different groups of students walked freely across the quad. No one could really explain why it was okay now. Everybody just knew. And if you ever visit Monroe High School, that's how it is today. It happened some time ago. I never even knew his name. But when he did, nobody who was there who will ever forget. Nobody. Susan Dunham. So what struck me about this story was that the guy who came and saved Lisa sounds a lot like Jesus. And sort of a contemporary version of, I would say, like the ripples that Jesus made when he was here on earth. We can think of him as like a Jesus figure. And in confirmation class, and really at every youth gathering, my job, as I see it, is to teach people how to be like this boy who saved Lisa, and to be their version of Jesus in their own lives. And I thought that was such a beautiful example of one guy changing the history of this school with just one simple, brave, and selfless act. So now I encourage you in your own life and in your own context, find something bold and maybe scary and brave to do to be Jesus in someone's life this week. Thanks for joining me. Have a great day.